All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to our Missouri Green Schools Learning Series. This is MGS 301, How to Audit Water, Waste, and Energy. If you're joining us as a participant live, feel free to use the chat feature for questions and introductions. And if you are watching this recording, then that is not available to you, so please don't do that. But feel free to email me questions and we will get them to our speakers, and feel free to, ask us anything as we go along. We're going to do some introductions first, just so you know who is in the room tonight and who is speaking. And then we're going to go through our waste, energy, and water auditing processes. So first up, we've got Maggie and Cassie. Maggie, Cassie, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure, we can go ahead and do that. I'm Maggie McCoy. I work in the sustainability division at Missouri Botanical Garden as the climate change education coordinator, but I also get to work with a lot of kindergarten through 12th grade students on waste reduction, energy usage, water, and climate change, along with those teacher professional development workshops as well. And I'll hand it off to Cassie.
Hello, my name is Cassie Knight. I am the Sustainability Education Instructor, also within the Sustainability Division at the Missouri Botanical Garden. I primarily am the person that you'll see in your classrooms from kindergarten up to 12th grade, working on those waste reduction projects, working within stormwater management, composting, and everything that falls underneath that umbrella.
Awesome. And then Chris, Ruth, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Chris Ruth. I work for Integrated Facility Services. We're a mechanical contractor, which is headquartered in St. Louis. We have offices in Columbia, Rolla, Lake of the Ozarks, and recently added an office into Springfield, Missouri. I manage part of our building automation and energy management division, and we do a lot of work with helping folks save energy through building automation and energy management systems.
Awesome. Thank you guys. And then I'm your third and final speaker. I think you all know me. I'm the one that sends all the emails. Deborah Rogers Curtis, and I'm the Green Schools Coordinator for all of Show Me Green Schools programs, including Missouri Green Schools. All right, so we are going to jump right into waste auditing and landfill diversion strategies. I'm going to pass the mic over to Maggie and Cassie, and Maggie and Cassie, just let me know. I'll keep flipping through your slides for you. But I'll go on mute, and if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will ask Maggie and Cassie when they are done with their presentation.
Okay, thanks, Deborah. I'm going to kick things off. So we're going to talk a little bit today about waste audits, how you can do one in your school, and sort of what they might look like depending on what kind of trash you're looking at in your school. So Deborah, next slide. Before we get too far into things, one of the things we always like to introduce is the problem solving framework we use, which is the 8-step action plan, which is one of the things we really believe helps students take action within their own schools and make these projects their own. So if you're thinking about doing Green Schools Quest next year, this is a great way to help make those projects really student driven so that students are taking ownership. So we always recommend sort of that first step is awareness, sort of what's the problem you're looking at? In this case, it would be waste, but really opening students' eyes to the issues and how they're sort of related to human health and the environment. The second one is really looking at issues. What are some issues connected to that specific problem? They could even be problems within their own school that they've noticed as well. Then we have them move on to research, which is finding out information about that specific problem. And this is really where that waste audit can come in, where students are actually researching and gathering data about their own school. And then players is that fourth step. And that's really where we want to introduce students to who's actually going to help us solve this within our building. And we really love this step because this is the chance when students get to talk with people in their building, adults in their building, who they might not normally interact with. So that could be maintenance or custodial folks. Those could be folks who work in their food service, but it's a way for them to really reach out and talk with other people in their school that contribute to those solutions. Next slide. And then we have our solutions and action steps. And we separate these, even though they sound similar, because we think of the solution step as the chance for students to really dream big and brainstorm as many possible solutions as they can. This is the chance for them to think about everything that they might want to do. And then this action step is really narrowing it down to one or two things that they're going to do within their school building and really taking into account sort of what they've talked about with those different players as well. So like, is this action that we want to take going to work with our custodial staff? Is it going to work with some of these other people that are actually implementing these solutions within the school, picking one and actually doing it? Assessing what happens afterward. How do you know that solution's effective? In our case, since we're talking about waste, might be doing another waste audit, and then evaluation. So this is where adults in the school can really step in and help students think through long term, how might we keep this going in our school building as opposed to it being a one and done project that doesn't really continue? How can we make sure this keeps going into the future? So as Cassie and I are talking today about waste audits, that's sort of the frame we're going in with. Next slide. And then if you've got younger students or you want to break it down a little bit in sort of a simpler format, we're really wanting students to understand the problem, take action, and then reflect on what really worked and what they might want to make changes on. So what Cassie's going to take on now is sort of that next step of actually looking at how do you do the waste audit. So you want your kids to dig through trash. What does that look like and how does that happen?
All right, so documenting the process. We want you to remember to take pictures, videos of this entire process while you're digging through the trash, and even prior to that, while you're coming up with those ideas and doing that research. This gives you pieces for your case study in the spring. It helps you highlight your work that you and your students have done along this long journey that you're doing. And these are also great support pieces to bring to PTA. It better helps you ask your admin about, if you want to bring that change into your school, you can give them those pieces to showcase what you did over that research time. Like you ask your PTA, your admin, your school board, even Missouri Green Schools. At that end, when you're putting everything together, turning in your project, you have all of those documents to give them. Next slide. So collecting real world data, those waste audits. When it comes to doing your waste audits, there's a lot of key factors that come into mind. The first one is being time. How long have your students have to work? How often is trash being picked up from the school? So this is whenever you have to get in contact with those administrators, with your maintenance staff, knowing what's going on within there. How much waste is generated within your school? Like we talked about earlier, those key players in that 8-step plan. How many students will you need to be involved? Will this be your classroom? Will it be a green club? Who's going to be there? Who will you need permission from? Again, having those key players in mind. Do you need to talk to your principal? Who's that maintenance person that you need to get to know and be best friends with so you know when it's getting picked up from your classroom or from the cafeteria? What materials will you need? Will you need a tarp? Will you need trash cans? Will you need gloves? What will your sample size be? Will you just be using 2 classrooms? Will you have 1 lunch period that you'll be going over? There's going to be all of those things that you need to take into mind. And what's your focus or interest? Like Maggie was saying, there's different things that you can be doing, and we'll chat about them in just a second. Next slide. So, which audit are you going to be doing? So there's different varieties of these waste audits. So as you can see on the screen, there's the whole school audit, which you'll have samples from areas from the school, whether that be your art classrooms, where you might produce a lot of paper to your cafeteria. This is good for determining system changes. If you want to change something about how much paper is being used in your classroom, this is a great thing to use. There's the classroom survey. This one's super quick and easy. You can look for contamination in your current system, and it ties specifically to a certain waste. So again, if you have a lot of plastic bottles being used in your classroom or paper, it ties specifically to that. We have our assessment survey, which you'll see in just a little bit. And this is a really detailed research where you can see from day to day what is being generated in your classroom. And this can actually look into ideas of purchasing. So this can lead right back into that admin of how much money are you actually spending on a certain item. That food waste focuses directly on that cafeteria, looks for, excessive food waste. Are they not picking up a certain thing at lunch? Are they getting it and they're not eating it and it's being thrown away? This is great for schools who usually already have an established recycling program. It's going well, and you want to dive into something that may be a little deeper into your school. And last but not least, we have our plastic audit. We are focusing specifically on that single-use plastic, so plastic bottles, all that cutlery, all of those things that you might be using in your cafeteria. And we're going to be separating those based off of, your foam, other food packaging. A lot of schools use styrofoam plates. So diving deeper into that. Next audit, or next, not audit, next slide. Classroom surveys. So this classroom survey is really great. This is sort of that pre-survey that you'll do with your students to determine what you might be throwing away in your classroom. Are you throwing away a lot of paper in your classroom? This is where you and your students will do that pre-survey to see what's going on inside your trash cans. Next slide. This is that assessment survey that I was chatting out just a second ago. This survey is actually super helpful for us and for your classrooms. If you're not really wanting to dive deep into the trash and be little raccoons and pick everything out, this is a great tool that you can use to look through your trash cans just from the bird's eye view and see, what are you throwing away? What are you seeing? Are you seeing a lot of chip bags? Are you seeing a lot of plastic bottles in your garbage? And this is a great way to go from classroom to classroom without having to pull everything out of your trash can. This is an 8-page survey that you'll see in just a second, and it'll dive deeper into all of those different categories that you'll see within your classroom. Next slide. So like I said, this is that 8-page survey that'll go through the cost of what's going on inside of your school. How much can, calculating that volume of waste that's going on within your trash can. You'll have that waste reduction and recycling. You'll see what could be recycled within your classroom, what can't be recycled. Next slide. And as you can see, these screenshots are a little, there you go. You can see that you'll see that the food waste is calculated from other waste. There's different tools and calculations that you'll be seeing on these different slides. Next slide. And again, it's just that 8-page survey that's going to be diving deeper into describing the type of waste that you're seeing, how it could be recycled, where are you seeing it, and how does it impact the environment. So this is a great tool to use in your classroom from start to finish, doing that survey, and then at the end having that discussion of like, what are the issues that are going on and what are the actions that can take place in our school, within our green club or within our classroom to better help that waste reduction. Next slide. So collecting real world data, waste audits. These are the different types of waste audits that you can do within your classroom. So like I said, you can be little raccoons within your school. And these are mostly the things that you'll find within your trash can. So most parts of St. Louis City and County have very similar recycling categories. So it's going to be that recyclable paper and cardboard, your food, the things that are compostable, recyclable plastic containers, non-recyclable plastics, so your chip bags, Ziplocs, your granola bar wrappers, straws. You'll have your recyclable materials like aluminum, steel, glass, and other items like school supplies or other is what we will suggest that being. As you can see on that screen, you'll have all of your different categories, and the students will be placing them within those bins to see what number of waste we'll have at the end. Next slide. So before the audit, what should you do? Your team is going to collect basic info about waste at your school. How much do you think you're throwing away? This is why that survey is great in the beginning. How much do you see? What do you see you're being thrown away? What do you see being thrown away in your classrooms? Communicate your plans with your school, your teachers, your custodians. Again, Make sure you're getting that approval from your custodians, knowing when trash is being picked up, especially if you're doing things in the cafeteria, knowing when you're going to have those bags. And then you're going to pick your day to audit. Next slide. So whenever you're doing that waste audit, like we chatted about before, you're going to have all of those different categories that you're going to be sorting them into. If you have someone like me that's going to be helping you with this, we are going to be weighing out all of those different categories. We're going to see how much paper, how much food, how many plastic containers by weight are going to be inside of your trash cans. You will get this survey results as well, or these waste audit results as well, to go to your principal, to go to your custodial staff, just to have that data on the back end. Next slide. So the day before the audit, you should always remind your students about the audit, just because if you're going to be in the cafeteria or in school, your school classroom, sometimes breakfast is served in your school classroom, knowing that there might be a food product or something like that in there that could get on their clothes. So making sure that they're wearing the proper clothes, making sure they know the location in which this is going to be. Is it going to be outside? Is it going to be inside? If it's outside, maybe not wear, the full jacket, the full hat. Make sure they know their timing, their roles. If you have a larger classroom, you could have one student be the timekeeper, making sure that they know which place is going to go. If a student knows that they need to put things in a certain pile, make sure that they know their roles. Review the waste audit process with the students. We will have all this information with Deborah as well, of all the steps that go into your waste audit. And it's also recommended to pre-sort your cafeteria waste into wet and dry foods, just because, we don't want our students being covered in milk and cookies that was probably at snack time. We want to make sure that that's set aside. Next slide. Your day of the audit, review your safety instructions and the data sheet with your students, making sure that they know their roles, know their timing, where they should be. Setting up your area and designating that spot, knowing which bin is which, having those following labels, recycling, landfill, and wet waste on them, so they know where all of those items should go. And then you're going to weigh and record the data for the amount of each category that was listed earlier. Next slide. And then I'm going to pass it over to Maggie.
Yeah. And so we're going to dive a little bit into projects now, but just one way that I've sort of been thinking about this and was challenged to reframe this in my brain at a conference I went to a couple of years ago, was thinking about, if you're not for zero waste in your school, how much waste are you for? And really starting to thinking about all those materials as they're coming into your school. You're paying for those materials to come into your school, and then you're paying for someone to throw them away. So while you have them in your building, what is the maximal amount of use you can get in out of that stuff before it leaves your building, and really starting to think about the stuff that comes in as material with value, as opposed to just something that you have to think about how to throw away later. So as we go through some of these ideas for projects, just to have sort of that as your brain is thinking about, how can we get the most value out of the stuff that we're paying for? Next slide. One school I just want to highlight, because they did use sort of that survey that Cassie was talking about, where they went around to the bins in their school and took pictures of what was in them instead of necessarily digging through all the waste as a full waste audit. This was one of the ways that they actually dug through waste in their school, and Bridgeway Elementary is now a National Green Ribbon nominated school, right? So you can start with doing just having kids go around and look inside the trash bins and start really small and sort of like work your way up through sort of this process. So you can see that they've got iPads and are documenting what is in all the bins in their classroom. And that's how they did their recycling audit of their building, to really determine what was going in the wrong place and where that was happening, to sort of target their efforts. And then I think one thing that Bridgeway did very successfully is, when they thought about their waste projects, they really focused on projects that fit with the culture of their school. They didn't try to make their school something entirely different overnight. They thought about, what does our school already do well, and how can we use our material better or produce less waste in the process of doing those things that are really very Bridgeway, is the best way I can describe it. So yeah, I challenge you to think about, like, what is already true about your school? What are your strengths? What are events that you already love? And how can we tweak them in little ways for them to produce less waste? Next slide. Potential projects that a lot of schools have looked at. One is that food waste reduction piece. And so is really thinking about in the scope of your cafeteria, are there ways you can start reducing food waste? So like if you don't have a share table, is it possible to put a shared table in? Missouri, the state of Missouri, through the Department of Education or Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, has share table guidance. So if you're not sure, that's a great place to go because they have rules on what you can do. And a lot of schools don't take advantage of that guidance already. So there's things you can do there. And also working with your food service provider on ways that you can tweak how you're offering food at lunch to still make sure that your students who need free and reduced lunch get what they need, but maybe you're throwing away less. So there's lots of possibilities there. Eliminating styrofoam. This is a bigger one, right? But we have a lot of schools in our area that have dishwashers and use styrofoam in their cafeterias. And there's lots of reason for this. And I'm not like saying anything bad about any school because a lot of things happen that pressure schools to use styrofoam or in other ways, but to start thinking about, is there a way that we can cut styrofoam from the school? Another thing to think about as we're sort of approaching the end of the year is that end of the year's clean out. We see it in a lot of schools. Everybody wants to get out as fast as humanly possible by the time it gets to the end of the school year, which means that all of that stuff just ends up in the landfill. And so thinking about really deliberately at the end of the year, how can you set up a procedure for students and teachers to sort their materials out of the stuff that's still usable so you can transfer it to the next year? It takes a little bit more time, but with a little thought on the front end, you can set up bins so that teachers and students know exactly where stuff goes so that stuff can be recovered. We actually worked with a school, Maplewood Richmond Heights, where we have a teacher in elementary school who helps facilitate this. And their teachers will actually turn stuff in at the end of the year and sort it into different categories. And then new teachers who are coming into the building in the fall can actually shop all of the old supplies before they go and buy stuff for their classroom. So it's also a really great money saving thing for teachers who are coming into your building too. So starting to think about how you might facilitate that and use materials you already have. Next slide. Resources, we'll talk about Missouri Botanical Gardens resources. One that we have found if you're interested in reducing plastic in your school is Plastic-Free Restaurants and the Center for Environmental Health. Plastic-Free Restaurants, despite its name, does have funds to reimburse publicly funded schools and nonprofits. So some of those private schools, the cost for a reusable item. So if you're currently using styrofoam or plastic and cost is sort of the barrier to getting to that next step, there are places where you can find funds to help fund getting those reusable items. Next slide. And us here at Missouri Botanical Garden will help you with a waste reduction project as well. So if you're like, I like the waste audit idea, I need some help with it, Cassie can come to your classroom and actually help you do that waste audit and sort of support you through that project and give you some guidance on that for either a semester or a full year, whatever works best for you. Next slide. And so this is just sort of those steps of that special project and some of the different work that goes into that. Next slide. And this was going to be a fun activity to do, but just something to think about is next steps as you're thinking about what you might want to do next is just think about a waste problem in your school that you really want to tackle and what might be some potential solutions to that and what would you need to overcome any barriers to those as sort of a way to kick off thinking about what this project might look like as you're sort of going into summer and thinking about that next school year. Next slide. And these are all those lovely resources that Deborah has put together related to waste audits. So what I'll do is I'll actually hand it off to Chris, who I think is next here talking about energy.
I'm going to pause you, Chris, because we do have some questions for Maggie and Cassie. The first one was one that has already been sent in early, so they didn't know you were going to talk about the LEAP program,
Mhm.
but they specifically asked, are there people out there that can help our school with waste audits? So I think you answered that question with LEAP, but is there a specific way that you would want teachers to approach you guys to say, hey, we really want to do a waste audit and we need help?
Yeah, so they can email either myself or Cassie. I will say this past year we did fill sort of all of our slots because a waste audit's sort of a very time-consuming process, so we can only take on so many at a time. So if you're thinking about it, reach out to us over the summer, and we'd be happy to start talking about setting something up so that you're ready once the school year starts.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, there were a couple of other questions ahead of time. Number one, how can I connect with my waste company if I'm just a teacher at a school? And that was her phrasing, just a teacher. I just want to say you are not just a teacher, you are a teacher. It's amazing. But the question is really how do we connect with a waste company if I'm not the administrator or the decision maker of the company?
Yeah, so a lot of times that is talking with your either administrator, a custodial staff, about who is picking up your trash and sort of who that contact is. So I mean, at some point you will have to talk to your administrator, especially if they're the one who's making sure the bills get paid, to get that trash hauled away. A lot of times those bins outside will say what the company is, but you might not know who the specific representative is for your school. So that is something where you will have to reach out to either like your admin or your custodial staff, whoever it is in there, to figure out who it is at your school.
Awesome. The next question I have personal experience with as well, so I can really empathize. She said, we used to recycle, but then we found out our big blue recycling bin was actually going to the landfill. Where should I start?
Yeah, so that's a really tough one. And we've run into that a lot. So one of the things I would try and like track down first is like who's doing that? Is that your waste hauler or your waste company? Is that because of contamination? Because we've had schools before that have dealt with illegal dumping in their bins, and they had to work with their waste hauler on how to prevent illegal dumping. And sort of once they made that connection, that helped quite a bit. So I'd figure out, first of all, why is that happening? Is that just something on the waste hauler side? Is there a dumping issue? And then the other thing that I would check into, because we do have some schools where either recycling is very inaccessible or there have just been issues with it, is to think past recycling. I'm not saying don't pursue it. I'm not saying don't recycle. Like, please hear me there. But start thinking about what might be ways you can reduce waste in your school that are also fully within your control, and not always dependent on an outside entity. And sometimes working on those projects can help build a little success and a little momentum on your school side as you're working out the external partner side of things if there are some issues there. Does that help, Deborah?
Yes, extremely helpful. Yes. And then the final question that I received ahead of time was, we conducted a waste audit, but we couldn't figure out what to do to translate the data into an action step. What would you suggest?
Ooh, that's great. First of all, I'd have to see your data. And it all depends, right? So a lot of times what Cassie and I do is we look at sort of that what weighed the most out of that category, and we start thinking about, like what are ways we could tackle that. Sometimes we also might look at like one of the most common ones we see in schools is like paper and cardboard is one of the most common items that gets thrown away in school. So is it an issue with one of those common items that by better signage or better bins, could we tweak something to make sure that that recycling step works? Without seeing the exact data, hard for me to make a specific recommendation. They can always email Cassie or myself, and we could help look at some of those things and figure out best next steps.
Fantastic. I will
Mhm.
include your contact information once I send this presentation out to everybody.
Okay.
For those of you who are here live, if you have other questions for Maggie or Cassie, just go ahead and toss those in the chat and we'll come back to them. For now, thank you. That was wonderful. I actually have already learned something, so thank you for that. And now we're going to toss it over to Chris Ruth, who is going to talk to us about how to do an energy audit and reduce our energy consumption.
Awesome, thank you. So talking about kind energy audits and kind of what they are. It's the process of assessing how the energy is used in a building and identifying the opportunities for energy improvements. These energy audits can be a bit of a lift sometimes. ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating, Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Engineers, actually has 3 different levels of energy audits that that they put out. And typically those are being done by professional engineers, PEs, or energy engineers. So there is a bit of a lift that goes into these, and we're going to kind of look at this from the DIY version of energy audits. So first step is preparation and planning. Really gathering utility bills is a great idea to get a baseline or a benchmark of where things are at. It'll be a great metric to look back at after the implementation of what's found, what the fruits of the energy audit, so to speak. Building floor plans is another great piece to have beforehand. It's amazing how many areas in buildings may not be traveled on a regular basis. And when you take a look at a floor plan, you can see that there's a lot of square footage that that may need to be explored as part of your energy audit. Sometimes putting together a team is a great way to do this. Again, depending on the size of the school, there could be a lot of areas to uncover, because as part of this energy audit, we're going to be looking at everything that is pulling electricity. So anything that's plugged in, anything that's powered, we're going to have to identify that and log that. So having a team for that is very beneficial. The walkthrough assessment is kind of the eye test, and that's really the level that we're going to be looking at energy audits. Going through the school premises, noting things like lighting, HVAC systems, and appliances, and just taking an inventory of everything that's there, and getting the relevant information from those. And sometimes that takes a little bit of research to get an idea of how much power those are being used. Dealing with HVAC equipment, finding the horsepower of a fan or a pump is a great way to get an idea of what that's using. When you take that and multiply it over run hours, you can get an idea of how much power that's being used. So getting an idea of what all you see on kind of that walkthrough. And then the operational practices of it as well. So once you have your inventory, what's being done with it? When is stuff running? When is it not running? Are there patterns that are being noticed through schedules and that sort of thing? Collecting the data is one of the harder parts. Like I said, getting an idea of how much energy is being used can be a little difficult, but again, finding the specifications of the energy usage of the equipment can really help with that. And then finding getting into the analysis part is when you really start to find those energy savings opportunities, and taking those opportunities and turning them into the recommendations is really the next step in taking the audit into something that's actionable. Looking at things like upgrading LED lights, or upgrading to LED lights, or optimizing HVAC equipment through schedules, which can be easy if the HVAC system has a building automation system. But if it's on standalone thermostats, it can be a little bit more difficult and a bit of a chore to get through and do all that. But once you've done this audit and determined the amount of energy being used by a piece of equipment based on its run hours, then it's easy to kind of do a little bit of math and say, if we subtract this number of run hours from this piece of equipment, then what sort of savings could we see from that? And then compiling that into a report for stakeholders is kind of that last piece, is how do we make this information meaningful and relevant, and then figuring out the priority of what can be done and how we're going to implement it. What is the feasibility? What is the impact? What are the things that are going to be lower cost but still have a pretty good impact? And again, depending on what's found as part of the audit, the cost can vary. Some things will need a little bit more of an expense, but might have a greater impact. But a collection of things that have the smaller expense can still have an impact as well. There's nothing, any change that's made is going to have some sort of an impact. All right, next slide. So then that kind of takes us to the energy efficiency side. So now that we've done this audit, we've figured all of this stuff out. We want to kind of talk about how we're going to reduce the operational cost and environmental impact based on what we've learned and what we found. There's a lot of mechanical changes and a lot of equipment changes that can be made, but one of the first things that has to be addressed is the behavioral changes. What's the impact that the people are having on the space? Finding ways to encourage students and staff to adopt energy-saving habits like turning off lights when leaving rooms, shutting down computers when not in use is a great way. A lot of computers are very efficient, and again, lights are very efficient as well, but the getting into that habit, that behavior of making an energy conscious decision is very, very necessary, a very necessary first step. Otherwise, anything else that's being done is very limited in what its impact is going to be. So some of these energy conservation things that we can look at: upgrading lighting. I've mentioned that a couple of times. Finding outdated fixtures and replacing them with efficient LEDs. This is going to give you longer lifespan on your lights and help reduce energy consumption. HVAC system optimization is a big impact for energy usage in schools. Typically, HVAC accounts for about 40 to 60% of a building's energy usage. And studies show that about 30% of that energy is wasted because equipment is being left to run evenings, weekends, holidays, and has a lot of run hours that aren't really needed. So programmable thermostats for better temperature control is great. Again, I come from building automation, so I'm always going to promote building automation as a fantastic way of tying all of this equipment together and finding ways to optimize it as much as possible. Smart energy management, using occupancy sensors to automatically adjust lights, occupancy sensors for HVAC as well. And again, a lot of those things can be standalone, but as part of a building automation system, you can really sort of take that to the next level. You want to be conscious of the impact of or the lift on the facility staff as well. A bunch of different motion sensors and a bunch of different thermostats in different spaces is going to take some time to keep up with. So finding a way to centralize that control through automation is a great way to do that. And calling back to the behavioral changes, helping people to understand the impact that they're having and why it's important is great. And that can be done through development of educational programs, finding a way to introduce energy efficient education into the curriculum, and find ways to help promote awareness among the students so that they understand the benefits of what they're doing and why they're doing it. Engaging the community is always a great way to have a bigger impact on schools. Finding ways to get parents involved, local businesses, community members in your energy savings initiatives, and discuss potential partnerships for funding or implementing of energy efficient projects. And then the monitoring and feedback is the very last part and one of the most important parts. Going back to that information that we found at the very beginning when we pulled our baseline energy usage, going back and saying, hey, what is the impact that we can make by making these changes, and then showing what's been made by doing so. Checking it regularly is important. It can't just be a one-time thing. A lot of energy audits are recurring and ongoing, and that needs to be a big part of it, because once all these changes are made, it's very often that they start getting undone relatively quickly. So it's important to kind of keep tabs on that and make sure that you're following up regularly, and then provide feedback to staff, students, and the community again on what you've done and how you've made an impact and what sort of impact you're expecting to see as part of your energy efficient implementation. Here's all the resources. There's a lot of stuff out there. Energy Star Portfolio Manager is a great resource. DOE has stuff as well. And then there's other funding options out there. A lot of utilities will offer incentives for energy projects as well. So I think that might be on the next slide. There's stuff about Ameren Spire, KCP&L, or Evergy. Sorry, it's not KCP&L anymore. Springfield Utilities. So there's incentives out there to do this. A lot of lighting projects can be fully incentivized, 100%, because lights are such an easy lift. HVAC projects, building automation projects, 50 to 100%, depending on the impact and the cost. So there's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of money out there for this, and a lot of power companies are happy to incentivize it because it positively affects them as well. And that's what I have.
All right, Chris, I've got a couple of questions that were sent in ahead of time for you. First one is a softball for you. Do companies ever do an energy audit for free, specifically for schools?
There are very, very low cost energy audits. I'm sure there's some out there that do that for free for schools. The eye test is kind of what we would look at as a low cost option, and that is walking through, taking a look at lights, determining if lights need to be updated, and that sort of stuff. When you really get into the math of it and really figuring out the impact and the cost, there's a lot of time that goes into that. So typically that's when they start to cost a little bit more. But I do know that there's companies out there that do provide that can kind of help with that eye test and give you the low hanging fruit, so to speak.
I also want to mention that if you are a school in Illinois, you have access to an absurdly amazing magical resource through the utilities companies that are required by law to provide a full free audit of your building and all services that are going into your building. So if you want more information on that, I will be sharing that with all Missouri Green schools. Chris, next question was, what should I do if my school is in a district that does not want to talk about energy savings? We live in a really political area where it seems like everyone is scared to be too open about, quote, green initiatives.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's I don't know. I just made a post on LinkedIn a little bit ago about this, that there's always going to be problems with policy. There's always going to be problems with funding. There's always going to be something out there, but every single energy conscious decision you make, every green decision you make is going to have some sort of impact. And it sounds silly, but turning stuff off, turning lights off, turning things off at the end of the day, you're making a difference. And it may not feel like it, but it's going to be hard to implement something systemic, especially if there's a cost associated with it. So just do what you can to think green and make energy conscious decisions.
I like that. All right, what should I pay attention to on my energy bills? I have my school's electrical and gas bills, but I don't really know what I'm looking at.
Yeah, and I'd love to provide the answer for that, but that's one of those things where we look to get those energy engineers involved with, and sometimes it's hard to tell, right? Because if you only have a single meter for a building, you're seeing everything. So that energy usage is showing you your HVAC, your lighting, it's showing you your refrigerators and your coolers, it's showing you every computer and Chromebook charging station, and everything that's plugged in is all shown in that one bulk piece. So that's kind of where the energy audit takes shape as we go through and we say, okay, if we know that this is the total piece of the pie, what we're paying every month, how do we figure out those percentages and what do we figure out where that impact is? So that's that question is the crux of what we're talking about. So where the start is with the energy audit and get an idea of what is affecting that and what of that is being wasted.
Yeah, that's a very, very good answer. Are there templates to track energy data, and is anything student friendly that you know of?
Templates, yes. I know there's I don't have links handy and I can probably get them to you, but I know there are templates and resources online that ASHRAE does provide. Student friendly is a tough one. I've been a mentor for the Green Schools Quest for several years. I've done one energy project and it was difficult. It was a difficult lift for the students to help with. Not impossible, but it is a little bit more of a chore. Finding older appliances, trying to find out how much energy that appliance is using, determining the run hours of that appliance, the kilowatt hours, the power that is used to do that, and then how much we can save by reducing it. It gets tough. It's a lot of math. I don't even do the math. I look to engineers to help me with my math because it's a lot. So as far as the calculations go, that's going to be a little bit of a heavier lift. But I had mentioned putting together a team of volunteers for the inventory, so that could be a great way to get the students involved. Having them run around and help you find everything, find the refrigerator that's tucked in the corner that nobody knew about, right? Helping to count light fixtures, helping to track down how many Chromebook charging stations or whatever do we have. So that could probably be the one of the parts where you really get the students involved is with that inventory phase and getting an idea of what all you have.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then again, if you're here live, feel free to put questions in the chat. And if you're watching the recording, feel free to email me questions and I'll get them over to Chris. Our final topic for today is water audit and reduction strategies. I'm your magical speaker today, and you might be thinking, why? You're not a water expert. And I'll tell you, my experience with water is from a school perspective. I was a teacher and then a principal in St. Louis Public Schools. And my building that I was the principal of was over 120 years old and had enormous water problems of every kind. So I accidentally became not an expert, but a user of water in schools. So I feel pretty comfortable talking about it here. So first, we're going to talk about 3 different types of school water issues. The first is water consumption, the second is stormwater runoff, and the third is drinking water access. And I just loved this photo of this extremely happy, cheesy man drinking out of the water bottle filling station. So please enjoy that with me today. Just perfect. So we're going to tackle each one of these topics in a short little way. The first thing is water consumption, and that's really what we're going to focus on in Missouri Green Schools, which is how do we conserve water usage? In Missouri Green Schools, our goal is to establish a baseline of how much water you are using in your building, and then to reduce it by 5%, then 15%, and then by 30%. 30% is a lofty goal, so that is it's hard to get there, but it's actually quite feasible. And especially in the first year or two of monitoring your water usage, often you'll show reduction simply by finding a leak. So it's actually pretty easy to get some water consumption reduction going on. The first step here is to establish that water baseline. And that goes back to what Maggie was talking about with waste in creating an audit system and what Chris was talking about with energy is auditing. It's very, very important to find your water bills. You can't really audit your water consumption without the water bill. There's a couple of ways to do that. First, you can just ask your principal and or district facilities manager. And if they have kept old utility bills, you're going to be set. If not, it's no big deal. You could also just contact your water company directly, and I'll send out this presentation later, and it has hyperlinks of all of the water companies in Missouri by whatever county you're in. And then there's also a couple of tips there to understand your water bill. Each company does it a little differently, so I don't want to talk in generalities, but there's a lot of different pieces of information, and you're really only looking for consumption. And if you want to track cost for the district, you can do that too. But really, once you get those bills, you're looking for trends. You're trying to track how much water is being used over time, and you're looking for peaks and valleys. You're looking for, days of the year or times of the day, even whole months that are very wasteful and or kind of dormant, like December, July are usually very low water usage months because school is usually not in session. But when school is in session, you're really trying to figure out when is our water being overconsumed. You also want to identify the different types of water that are coming onto your campus. There's all these great technical terms, and really what you're trying to do is you're trying to reduce all of them because each type of water is taking water from the earth in some capacity, no matter what type of water it is. After you look at your bills for about a quarter of the year, you can most likely establish a water use baseline. The only way you cannot do that in one quarter is if you get a bill that is for a quarter. So, for example, if you're in the Missouri American Water District, as is most of St. Louis County, they can bill you in different ways, and some schools are set up to receive a quarterly bill. So you only get the information for an entire quarter. You don't get to see the month to month. So if you're getting quarterly bills, you might want to have a longer period of time. There's a couple of trackers and templates that you can use that are all free here. The easiest one is the water meter reading template. So you can actually have your students go and do this. They can read the water meter right off of all of the different devices themselves, which is pretty cool. If your administration says yes to that. Our water was in the basement and was filthy, so we could not allow students in our particular building to do that, but eventually we cleaned that up and then they got to participate. The water management action plan takes it a step further of not only let's track our water, but let's also figure out what we're going to do now that we have that data. Then once you have the data, what do you do with it? I want to first start by saying this link at the top here, water consumption reduction strategies in school, will lay out step by step just very basic ideas of how to either take a low or no cost solution to lower your water consumption. The first one is pretty easy. Create signs in your school. You can do that with a free Canva account. You could also do it digitally, so you don't even have to print signs. You could have a communication campaign of some kind to help kids especially, but also adults know how to reduce their water usage. Basic things like the bathroom fountains, water fountains, the bathroom sinks, that kind of thing. If you're looking for, a kind of bigger and possibly more expensive solution, you can actually install different things like water sense products throughout the building, touchless faucets and toilets, water aerators, and motion sensors. The cafeteria, as Maggie mentioned, reusable trays not only helps with trash reduction, but it also helps with water consumption. And using a full dishwasher rather than hand washing will really reduce your water usage pretty significantly. Many schools also have laundry machines, especially if you have younger students in your building. We always did several loads a day. One very small and easy tip to saving water is to use the cold water cycle and only wash with a full load. That's true at your home too. In the outside area, it's pretty fun and exciting to save water because it makes your land prettier in addition to saving water. Using native plants for landscaping that require minimal watering once they're established, or even no watering once they're established. Native plants is just like a magical thing. You water them when they are put in, and then you basically get to leave them alone because they are naturally geared to this region and they know how to live through drought and through large rains. In the Midwest, we have, as we have seen, several weeks of raining. These plants can survive. Water catchment systems like water sense irrigation methods or rain barrels. We're going to talk a lot about rain barrels in a minute. That's a really great way to just reuse water that is coming down from the sky. There's a hyperlink here to help you know when to water your plants and landscaping. This is something that you could easily do if you have a school garden and your class is in charge of it, or if you have a landscaping team or a buildings and grounds staff, feel free to pass that along in a nice gentle nudge of, hey, maybe watering at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the summer is not the most efficient way to water. And then water smart landscaping for your buildings and grounds is really, really helpful. Just creating a way to conserve water outside. Our next category of water in schools is stormwater runoff. I love this image. It shows what happens when it rains, why it's such a big deal, and where it goes. If you've ever lived in a hurricane area or any place that has ever flooded, you'll get boil orders, or you won't be able to drink the water at all. And that's because all of the pollution from stormwater runoff has gotten into our water supplies, and we need to take a break from it for a bit. There are a lot of resources to share on stormwater, so don't get too overwhelmed by it. But each of these things is incredibly helpful for a school and for a teacher to take on. I would say start with these two, the very top one, the stormwater, the basics, because it really helps you understand where the stormwater comes from, where it goes, and why it's important to mitigate it. But then we also have all of these very simple step-by-step guides of how to handle stormwater at a school. A lot of schools have gardens in general, but rain gardens specifically are there to basically take that extra water and soak it into the earth rather than shoving it into a sewage system. And then green roofs is a little bit less common here in St. Louis and across Missouri, but it is becoming more and more popular across our country, and especially in cities like Vancouver, where they're just growing upwards instead of growing out. Green roofs really help absorb rainwater instead of shoving it into the storm systems. Much cheaper and much easier to achieve, however, are rain barrels. Rain barrels are just basically like mini cisterns, and they are capturing rainwater from the rooftops, and then you can use it, reuse it for landscaping purposes, or really anything that you need water for. There's some great resources here of how to build a rain barrel. There's several examples of real schools across the country that have reused rain barrels successfully. One of our Green Schools Quest projects was a winner a whole year ago. That was in Springfield, Missouri. That was Central High School, and they did an entire water catchment series for their 7 school gardens, and they basically do not water their gardens at all because they have the rain barrel system working for them. Finally, we have drinking water access issues. We have a lot of lead in our water in St. Louis, but also in most urban areas, they're dealing with lead in schools. And so safe drinking water access is extremely important. It's a major environmental justice issue and just a basic human right. And so really making sure that our schools are ready and willing to provide safe drinking water access is essential. There's a couple of how-to guides here, but there's also some, like this middle one, drinking water access checklist. These are things that you could do with your students. You can go through and audit your own building and say, do we actually have clean water coming in to our building? The answer should be yes, but oftentimes schools have not been able to find the funding to mitigate a lead in the water situation. Or they might have a different issue, not lead in the water, but maybe something like stormwater, sewage issues that are really contaminating something and bringing in unwanted issues into the water. These are all great activities that you can use with students and make sure they're involved in the process. Finally, we're going to wrap up in just another minute or so. Chris mentioned the Star Energy Portfolio Manager. I want to make sure that you understand that this is an amazing magical tool that you can use for basically auditing almost any system in your building. Most schools are already part of the Star Energy Portfolio system. And so asking your district facilities manager if you are allowed to have access to your school's data is going to give you a wealth of information. Many school districts are already tracking this information, and you could just take it instead of trying to do all these audits on your own. Even if your school is not using the Star Energy Portfolio Manager, you can sign up as a teacher and you can put in data. You can put in your utility bills, you can put in even your manually found information. You can put all of that into the Portfolio Manager. For the teachers who are asking about templates, the Star Energy Portfolio Manager is a great place to house your data because it will create the templates for you. You do not have to create anything at all. It's wonderful. There's a lot of information here about how to use the Star Energy Portfolio Manager specifically for schools. And I think that's really important to note that Star is not built for schools, but can easily be used for schools. And so they have created toolkits beyond toolkits to make sure that school users can use this. We also have a couple of extra energy resources, and then our Show Me resource, Show Me Green Schools resource library has an entire page on waste, an entire page on energy, and an entire page on water, with lots of resources available. I also wanted to share the START guide. If for those of you in Missouri Green Schools who are a little bit more advanced, you have a free account in START, which is different from STAR. START is a specific school sustainability tracking device. And because you're a Missouri Green School, you have free access to it. And that audit for wastewater and energy is extremely student friendly and extremely teacher friendly. So even if you are not the decision maker of your building, you can use that to make sure your school is up to snuff. I want to mention just a few upcoming events for our Missouri Green Schools. First, I would love to make an appointment with any of you and chat through any of these issues or where you're at in Missouri Green Schools. So make an appointment with me via Calendly. Next, this weekend, Earth Day Festival in Forest Park. This is our St. Louis Earth Day event where we will be tabling from April 26th and 27th. It's literally all day Saturday and all day Sunday, and we will be there. And then our next upcoming learning series is MGS 401. And this is for our most advanced Missouri Green Schools participants or those schools who really want to go for the National Green Ribbon Award. We will really go in depth into how to achieve that award because it is extensive. And then finally, in the fall semester, Maggie, Cassie, and Chris will be rejoining us for a 1 hour session on each of their topics. And so instead of trying to, get through all three like we did today in our overview, we will give them lots of time to really do a deep dive on water, waste, and energy auditing. Request for review is coming up in June, at the end of June. I'm sorry, July 1st is our request for review. So if you are a Missouri Green School and you're ready to move up a level, remember that you need to turn that in by July 1st, and we will announce your level in late August, early September. And then finally, our upcoming event on September 3rd is to celebrate those new levels. It's a virtual celebration so that all schools across the state can join us. Mark your calendars. We're excited to see you there. I'm going to leave my email up here for a moment and I will stop recording and I'll open the floor up for any questions from our live audience. And for those of you who are joining us in the recording, please feel free to email me and let me know if you have questions for our speakers. Thank you very much.